Hello, and welcome to Journey to SEA 2025. I am your host, Shellyan Edwards Barron, a creative writing specialist here to talk to you about reports, narratives, and comprehension. Because comprehension is the other side of writing. When we write, we produce. When we read, we receive and we comprehend. So it's all working together. So when students learn about narrative writing, they're learning about fiction comprehension on the other side. When they learn about reports, they're learning a little bit about the nonfiction comprehension. So it's all working together. Thank you so much for joining me. I know today is quite a rainy day. So we had some, flashes of lightning and some thunder and the little power surge and a little disconnection of the internet and all those things as well. So, fingers crossed that we make it through this session without any glitches because we know how it gets when it rains a lot. Now it's nice, cozy weather. So, hope you have, for those of you who drink the coffee, a nice hot cup of coffee would go really good right now. I don't drink coffee anymore, so I could probably go for some hot chocolate or some tea. Either way, I'm going to get something hot as soon as I'm finished here. So, settle in. Today we have some stuff to get done. And for those of you who are joining live, thank you so much for joining. For those who are new to the program, thank you for your time. And let me tell you just a little bit about myself before I get into it. So, when I say I'm a creative writing specialist, is because I look at writing from multiple different perspectives, from the side of the writer, from the reader, from the process of putting the piece together, editing it, and so on. In addition to teaching the writing that I do to primary school students, I am also a developmental and copy editor. Now, what that means is that for those who are writing books and they need somebody to read it through and guide them what changes they can make, that's what I do with the developmental editing. If they've already had that done and they want the grammar and the punctuation and the format and the outlining everything modified. That's what I do with the copy editing to make it publishable. So I am speaking in terms of the writing and training that I do. You'd be surprised. We think, well, okay, for this is primary school, so the students are just learning a couple of things. The fact is, what students are learning at the primary school level is what they're going to be reviewing at the secondary school level and at tertiary level and in the world of work from their reports all the way up. Even though at this point they're doing, um, I guess, creative reports because they may not have experience the situations. This is an introduction to help them start thinking along the lines. And if they miss this, it makes the secondary school a little bit more challenging. And if they don't get it there, when they get to university, it's even more challenging. I mean, I taught university writing for a number of years, including academic writing, communication skills, and so on. So I know what happens at that level when students don't get the foundation that they need. So let's work on getting them the foundation. So I'm happy that you're here and I'm glad that you're taking this seriously. Yes, you're aiming for an exam, and we're talking a lot of exam strategies here, but you're also aiming to give your child or your students that foundation skill that is necessary. And I say skill in a general sense because for each one of them, we're looking at different skills. And so, as has become my custom, let me do the share thing. And this is what we're covering today. We're going to be looking at competition reports. Now, I'm doing this, we'll go through this fairly quickly because, in all honesty, when it comes to the report writing, if we look at the prompts that we have at our disposal, we have three options. I think it's 2019, 2021, and 2024 are all report writing prompts. And so we have three sets of prompts to look at. If you study those, which I have done extensively, you'd realize that competitions aren't really tested the way we might think they would be. And in fact, you would find activities, events, and incidents and accidents. Those are the four report types that I see really heavily focused on in the exam. But we need to look at competition because competition, excuse me, can be seen like an event. And so it is not completely out of the water that we're never going to see a competition report prompt in an SEA exam. And remember, we want to give students as broad an opportunity as possible so that they can really make a choice and not, this is the only prompt I could write on, so I'll choose this one, right? So we're going to look at competition reports. We're also going to look at the narrative writing checklists, which means we're going to discuss how you create one, and we would be reviewing the holistic rubric so that we can, at this point with narratives, we've covered a lot of stuff and we're writing complete narratives now. We're looking at timing and so on. So we need to pause and take stock of where we are. Most students will be doing their end of term exam in about 2 weeks, right? I believe it's about 2 weeks, most of them. I know many schools don't do the exam in the last week of school. You know, when we were growing up, we did the exam in the last week of school. Things have changed a little bit to give teachers the opportunity to grade, more time for grading and whatnot. So exams are coming a little bit earlier than the last week because, of course, last week needs to have Christmas party, right? This is the first term. So we're gonna do all the heavy lifting before. So now is a good time to kind of take stock of where students are with their writing and to set targets so that we know what we're going to do between now and the end of the term to achieve the target. And then we're going to look at responding to graphics. With looking at the graphics, we're going to look at the 2023 and 2024 exams and see what those graphics look like, as well as what the questions are and how we can possibly answer those questions. So that's the agenda for today. And as we've gotten into the habit, we're going to look at some reminders that I had this week. Now, this week was a real, I don't know, I had such an epiphany this week when it comes to working with students and some of the challenges that they have because I study my students all the time. I'm always interested in what's happening with them and how I could reach them and get them to their best writing self. And so the first thing that came to me this week was puzzled by the beautiful sentences. And I'll give you the scenario that got me to this point. Um, I have a student who, when I tell you this child's writing is absolutely beautiful. Whoever worked with him in terms of sentence construction and grammar and putting the ideas together, they did an awesome job. And his mom tells me that he reads a lot. And this is where I suspect he gets all of these ideas from as well. So he knows the structure of the sentences to put them together. And he has the vocabulary and the experience and exposure with the writing to really get these beautiful sentences. But his stories have two fundamental problems. He doesn't focus on the responses of the characters, like when they respond to the challenges and whatnot. So challenges will come up and the character will just continue doing whatever. And then because of that, there isn't any real character description in terms of physical description. So he doesn't focus on the characters enough. And the issue is that at school, because of his beautiful writing, now I didn't ask for permission to share. So I'm just going to read one sentence for you to tell you I mean, when I read it, and this is, I've been reading his stories, and he's been doing this for a long time, and we've been working on getting him closer to dealing with certain things. But then I read this particular, well, this was one sentence from a particular paragraph, and I tell you, I was absolutely blown away. I'm looking for it, so I'm just going to read this one sentence. Um, oh, which one should I read? Okay, I'm going to give you two, right? Now, he wrote this during a practice in class and submitted it same night in his handwriting. His mom just took a photo and sent it. So this is not something that he had chance to revise and whatever. So whatever he did, and the prompts were given on the day. So this is something that he genuinely created himself. Now listen to this and tell me if you're not just blown away. So I'm going to read the two sentences, right? Soon after, in the silence, I heard it, a faint melodic humming like a lullaby from another time. It grew louder, closer, until I could feel the breath of the past on my neck. Now, let me just pause for you to soak that in, right? And let me read it again. Whew. Soon after, in the silence, I heard it, a faint melodic humming like a lullaby from another time. It grew louder, closer, until I could feel the breath of the past on my neck. Now, doesn't that just scream, I want to read this book? Seriously. It's like, I mean, I I I read it and I'm like, what? It was just so amazing reading that. And that's just two out of the whole paragraph, right? It was just such an amazing paragraph. But then he moved on so quickly from that, didn't describe the character at all, and didn't show any of the character's emotional responses to what happened. So he felt this thing on his neck. How did it make him actually feel? Was it exciting? Was it scary? It could just be like excitement bubbling in him. And so it just went on too quickly. So after such amazing and beautiful writing, I couldn't score him high. So I'm working with him on the other things. But what happens at school, his teacher grades him consistently up, like, 17, 18, 19, because his writing is absolutely amazing when he writes those kind of sentences. But that's not all a story is about. And so this is where the editor in me would kick in and say, you know what? Amazing writing, but we're missing some things still. And so while the story needs sentences like that, and I wish all my students would write with that kind of, descriptive precision, a story is really about the character first. So if we don't know who the character is, we don't know anything about the character, we only know this is what the character is experiencing. We don't know how they're responding. We don't know the impact of the responses on them. Then we're going to have a problem with the story. So the thing that really came out to me during that session with him was that the a story is about the character first. Yes, you want all of this kind of beautiful writing because, like I said, when I read that, I thought, "Who? Where's the rest of this? I need to read this book." Um, and I told his mom as such, because I really believe if he wanted to make a career at writing, what it is we're working on, we could deal with it. An editor could deal with it, right? But he needs to focus more on his character. So it's like people. Stories are about people and the experiences they face, how they react to those experiences, the lessons they learn, and so on. But the focus is on the character. This is a narrative, it's not a descriptive paragraph. It's a narrative that focuses on a character. And so that is something that really struck me, that students could really write these wonderful sentences, wonderful paragraphs, but still miss key components. And we're going to look at those key components in a bit more detail when we get to the narrative section of this session today. So you'd understand a little bit more about what I mean. It's a combination of things that makes a narrative an 18 to 20, not just that beautiful writing. So, in as much as it pained me, I could not give him the 17 or the 18 because of the other things that were missing. And so, this is a note for teachers and parents, mainly for teachers. When we score students high, 18, 19, during their practice and their preparation, we're setting them up because what we're telling them is that there isn't room for growth and there isn't room for practice, there isn't room for development. It does not matter how well a student writes, there is always room for growth. They can add more descriptions, they can add more details, they can shorten things. There's always room for that. And so we do need to be careful about being, I call it bamboozled by beautiful sentences because, man, I tell you, it just, I have read stories by adults that didn't include that kind of beautiful writing that I read to you today. So I know if that child wants to develop his writing and get into publishing, he'd get in because of that kind of structure. But we need to add more. So he needs to work on some stuff still, right? So that's the one thing. The second thing that sort of really um, hit me this week was you can't train a tree by cutting it down. And this is something that, I mean, it's one of those sort of, um, master sensei cryptic kind of, sensei cryptic kind of, wisdom that we drop on people. But let me explain what I mean. Many times I meet students who have been practiced in the wrong things. And so when they come to me, it's because they're doing everything that the teacher says to do, they're doing everything that the textbooks that they've been exposed to say to do, but neither the textbook nor Miss Osu would is giving them the detail and the actual thing that they need to practice on. Because teachers have a way of saying, add more description. Now, what does that mean exactly? Add more description, add in character description. So, for example, for that student who is missing the character description, I didn't just tell him, okay, you need character description. I said, okay, these are three ways you can add it in. Let's take one of your paragraphs. You see how the character responded here? This is a good opportunity to add in character description, physical description, and you could add it in this way. And we brainstormed and I showed him how to add it in. It's not enough just to say add it in. We focus on identifying problems, but we don't give enough information on how to fix those problems. So, what happens when students come to me and they're struggling with their writing and they believe they're doing everything they're supposed to do, but the essays are falling short? What is happening is that they are stuck in doing the wrong things. And so, for this particular student, he was following a format that told him focus on setting description in your introduction. Now, that works well if you are writing a longer story and you have more time and opportunity to add in information about the character and what is actually going on in the story. So, what happened is that in his stories, his introductions are beautiful. When I tell you beautiful, the description of the setting and all the movement and the visuals and everything, sounds. I mean, it's like a study in how to integrate setting description into sentences. Absolutely beautiful. But then after reading the introduction, I don't know who the main character is. I don't know exactly where they are or why they are there. I mean, I have a wonderful description of a scenery, but I don't know, okay, this is this place and this is why the character is there. And I don't know what the character wants. All I've gotten is a wonderful description of scenery, which is what he was told. So he is doing exactly what he's told, but he's been given incorrect advice. A story introduction is not meant to focus on setting description unless you have a long introduction that's like 3, 4 paragraphs that you can also add in the details about the character, what the character wants, and reasons for them being where they are. So, focusing on the setting description in your introduction is part of it. An introduction is supposed to do 5 things. An introduction is supposed to hook the reader, introduce the setting with descriptions, introduce the character with physical descriptions, say why the character is where they are, and tell the reader what the character wants. What's the desire? What is the objective? What's the goal? What is the character aiming for? That is what's supposed to be in an introduction. And so, me now having to deal with these things, I can't come and tell him, hey, forget what your teacher told you. That's like trying to cut down the tree because that's what he has learned. It's not going to just uproot out of his mind. I can't cut it down and plant a new tree. I have to work with what he has and gently nudge and guide through templates, through explanations, through showing him how to fit what I'm recommending into what he already has. So we're not doing away with what he already has because what he already has is beautiful. We want to add to that beauty by giving more information. We don't want to take it away because that's going to cause problems. It's not a matter of confusing him, it's about adding to what he already knows. And so it's something that I have to keep reminding myself. Lots of students are being taught the wrong things. They've been given acronyms that give them ideas, but don't tell them how to put it into practice. And so they learn the ideas and then they try their best to put it into practice, but it's difficult because they've not effectively been taught how. And I'm not blaming the teachers either. I'm a little upset with the people who write the books, but because that's kind of adding to the problem when you have the textbooks missing details, but it's not the issue. It's like a combination of things. So the teachers haven't been taught effectively how to teach the writing. So they're using books. Some books are really well done. Some books give you lots of explanations and examples, but not all of them do. And unfortunately, when students come to me, it's because they're having challenges, of course, because I'm a tutor. I don't have a classroom during the day. I'm not a classroom teacher, standard 5 teacher, standard 4 teacher. I work with students who are having challenges. So when they come to me, it's because they're already ingrained into this incorrect notion of what a narrative is at this level. And so they're struggling to make things come together. And so I have to work with what the student have. And I cannot say, okay, stop that, do this, right? So these are my epiphanies this week. And so I was considering whether or not to really go through with the parent teacher training in December, but I'm definitely doing that. So look out this week because I gave his mom some assignments too, to help work with him because I don't meet with him every day. So there needs to be some stuff that has to be done every day. So, all right. Thank you so much for listening to the rant. And I know the rants are yes, me putting some things out there, but I'm sharing because understanding these points are going to help you help the child, whoever you're working with, really develop their writing and comprehension skills. I was going through the statistics the other day because I really don't understand with all of these textbooks and stuff out there and so many things, what are we missing when it comes to creative writing for the national average to be 59%? And then I realized that comprehension now has dropped from last year. And so what are we missing? So I'm hoping that you're going through these programs and you're finding out what we're missing. What we're missing is A, there's a lot of misconception out there that needs to be addressed that isn't being addressed. So many times students are being taught the wrong things. That's one. And two, when we tell students what to do, we don't help them because we haven't shown them what to do, how to implement what we're telling them. That is what we're missing. So let's get into it so I could help you, help your child or your students by showing you how to do some of these things. And of course, I try my best to provide examples and worksheets. I'm a little behind with producing all of the worksheets that I have in my head, but they're coming. So keep on the lookout for the worksheets as they come. And so I'm going to show you how to deal with some of these things, right? So let's start with the reports. We do reports first, then we do the narratives, then we look at comprehension to wrap it up. So for competitions, now the thing to note about competition reports is that there are different types of competitions. And so not all competition reports would be written exactly the same. So, like with an incident, you could create a template. With an accident, you could create a template. With competitions, you're pretty much going to end up with two templates. Why? Because there's a difference between an individual competition that a participant is engaged in and a group competition where there's a team involved. So there are two kinds of competitions, two types. So we have to get that understanding immediately that there are two kinds and we need a slightly different strategy for when we're approaching them. So for the individual competition, you will talk about the participant as an individual engaged in certain activities, and then you would mention one or two other participants who are also in the competition and what they do as well. When you're dealing with a team, you don't necessarily have to include yourself because you can talk about the team and other members of the team. When you're writing an individual competition and you are a participant, then you must include yourself. And so these are immediate differences that are very clear. And so we need to get that, make sure students know that right up front. The second thing is that we have to look at competitions in a way of beginning, middle, end, and they're wrapping up. What I should have also added in there was the preliminary information. So let me see. I'm going to add that in so that you could see because I really want you to get that bit. Preliminary information, and then we do the right? Pay attention to preliminary information, beginning, middle, end, and then wrap up. Right? I'm trying to see if I can get it in a one sentence to show you, but um, let's see. All right. Yep, that could work. Right. There we go. So let me share the screen again because I really want you to get that point. I want you to get the point that when it comes to competitions, competitions are an event and we do need those sections in addition to the beginning, middle, end of the competition itself. And so this is where we get into the um all right, let me go back to present so you could see the screen with the adjustment that I made. Right? So we want to pay attention to preliminary info, beginning, middle, end, and then the wrap up. So the preliminary information, remember this is a competition, and we need readers would need a little bit of information about rules and regulations, especially if it's not like a typical competition like the competition like like football or lawn tennis or different things that everybody would be kind of familiar with. We really can't take it for granted that readers would know how judging is being done, how the winner would be selected, and those kinds of things, right? So we need some preliminary information. The before the competition begins, because it's like an event, you'd have introduction of teams, you'd have statements from welcomes and all these kinds of things, and then you have the beginning, middle, end of the competition itself, and then you have the wrapping up like prize giving and so on. So when you're working with that like five paragraph structure, you would end up with a certain format for the introduction. Your report, first paragraph answers the who, what, where, when. You name the teams, etc. Your paragraph two, what happens before, would be preliminary information. And then the beginning of the competition, you could start that in the paragraph two as well, or leave that for paragraph three. So paragraphs three and four would cover beginning, middle, end of the competition. And then you're wrapping up after the competition has ended. People don't just, okay, competition done and everybody disappears. There's a wrapping up. Sometimes we get announcements of winners, we get prize giving, um, you know, responses from judges, all sorts of different things can happen at the wrap up section. And so we want to look at that to see how things are organized so that students would know what exact details would go into which paragraph. And then we really want to look at some rules and regulations for competitions because we take it for granted that everybody, I mean, Trinidad is cricket and football country, right? We have a whole section obsessed with cricket, an entire section obsessed with football. We are on the world stage in terms of our athletes when it comes to football and cricket more than any other sport, I think. And so we think that everybody knows what happens, but they don't. I've had students, where they had to write about a cricket competition and they just pretty much made up everything because they didn't understand the rules of cricket. They didn't know what a boundary was, what the wicket was, no details on this competition. And so taking it for granted that students understand how to write about a competition is not something we should do. So we want to get the major ones covered. So cricket, football, things like spelling bees. We want to get things like panorama competitions, calypso competitions. So you could make a list of about 5 to 10 that you think are important. So I just called five: cricket, football, spelling bee, panorama, so that's steel band, and then calypso. Those are five. Then you can add like poster competitions, creating posters. You can add in any others. So I've given you six as a starter. If you want, you could just work with those six, and in that you can have the team and the individual. And so you want to make sure students understand what are the rules, what are the guidelines, what are the regulations, what normally happens in a competition like that. Make sure you're double checking that they know these things. And then you want to brainstorm vocabulary and terminology. So if you're talking cricket, you need to know what a boundary is, what a wicket is, what's an over, right? You don't have to get into all the technical stuff. So maybe not use of jargon because this is a formal report, but you do need to know some of the terminology that you could use effectively while writing about this competition, right? And then, of course, as always, you want to see what transition words and phrases are appropriate because those are always important in a report to join the ideas. So, what are you doing this week? You want to review the content before, during, after. Make sure we get that preliminary idea. What happens at the beginning and start of the competition? What happens during the competition? What happens after, immediately after the wrap up, the preliminary? Step by step, we're looking at a competition within the context of a 4 or 5 paragraph report, right? And then we want to review the terminology. So we make a list of the competitions that we want to make sure the students could respond to effectively. And then, what do you know about this competition? What do you need to know about this competition that you would be able to put in a report? And then finally, get some prompts from some of these, and you're writing a complete report, and you're specifically looking at this before, during, after. At this point, we're kind of looking at most things. So we're looking at that paragraph development, um, the 5 paragraph structure. We're looking at the content, the information. Does it make sense? We're looking at how much information was given. We're looking at the transitions, and we're pretty much looking at this complete view of the report. So that's what you're working on this week with the competition report. All right. And of course, if you're stuck with prompts, the report challenge has an entire booklet on competitions that gives you some of these details that I just shared, plus a sample competition report and a few prompts that you could work with. The report planning worksheets. This one has 5 report prompts that are focused on competitions that students can brainstorm through. So if you don't have a copy of either of these, getting a copy would give you what you need for each section of that. All right. So that's it for competitions and reports. Let's switch over now to narratives. And what we're looking at for narratives today would be doing that. We're stepping back, we're taking a spot check, we're looking at the narratives as a whole, and we're reminding ourselves what is needed. So let's do that. Let's remind ourselves what's needed. So, what you see on screen, this is taken from the holistic rubric, which is what is used for grading of SEA narratives. And you want to go through this and make sure you're familiar. Again, remind yourself what is here. And you can do this with the student. Make sure the student understands this is what you're going to be graded on. So, content, we want to get setting, we want to get characters, we want to get plot, We want to get descriptions. All of these things are necessary for content. Language, vivid, descriptive, and figurative language. So we want both plus. So vivid and descriptive and figurative, not one or the other. And then when it comes to organization, well, we have plot for organization. And that's a pretty big deal when it comes to a narrative. If the plot is not solid, then you'd have lots of beautiful sentences that readers are not going to understand properly. And at the end of reading, they'd be like, huh, what's going on in this? I like that description and I like that description, but what is the story about again? You don't want to get that from the reader or the examiner. So, plot is absolutely important. And so, I I have my own plot format, and um, students, I share, the 12-point plot, but all of that fits within the standard plot development. This is not something that I just have my own random plot development. And so, what happens a lot is that I have students who are and parents who are concerned that, the 12-point plot kind of sounds a little different. And how do you fit that into what the teacher is doing? Because remember, the teacher is grading the child. And then is it anywhere close to what the examiner has to do? The difference between what I do in terms of that 12 point is that I don't just tell students, have this. I show them how to do it. And that's why we end up with the 12 different things that students need to pay attention to. So you have the hook. What is the responsibility of the hook and how do you create one? We have the context where you introduce the character, the setting, and what the character wants. How do you do that? Then you begin the problem. You introduce the problem. We call that the complication because you're complicating things. And then the character has to respond to that. So if students would follow the 12-point plot, then they would never forget character reactions, emotional response, behavior response, speech response. They're not going to forget the dialogue, which you would see here. Characters are skillfully developed through physical description, actions, and dialogue. We need all three for a student to be considered exemplary and score within the 18 to 20 bracket. Now, for those of you who are new and you didn't get the explanation of the rubric, the way it is done, we have two examiners marking the student. Each would mark out of 10, and then when we add them, we get the total out of 20, right? So that's why you're seeing 9 on 9, 10, 7, 8 here, because this is for one person. And then when they get the other one, so one person could give you 9, the other one give you 10, you get 19 out of 20. One person give you 7, the other one gives you 8, you get 15 out of 20. One can give you 8, one could give you 9, you get 17. That's pretty much how it works. And so the plot plot format that I advocate, it's not like random, I kind of manufactured it. It actually follows the standard plot format. And I'll give you, there's this absolutely wonderful, like, I guess, video, absolutely wonderful video about plot. It's a song. So I'm going to call it Plot Mountain Song. You could probably just search that up um, on YouTube. Plot Mountain Song. Oh, I put mount. I meant mountain, right? So let's see. I'll delete this comment and put it back with the correct spelling. right? So that's it, and that's the plot mountain song. I put it in the chat, but I'm just going to share what it looks like for you so that you would, when you find it, you know that you found the correct thing. Share screen so that you can see it. All right, so let's stop share that. Right, so this is what the beginning of it looks like, right? So when you see this, you know that you've gotten the right one. I think, let me see if I could go back and see what does the thumbnail look like, right? This is what it looks like with the dragon from Scratch Garden. Yep, absolutely wonderful. They do an excellent job at explaining exactly what goes into each section. So if you're wondering and you're thinking, huh, how do I explain this? That's a good place to start. And if you want to get the details of what to do in each section, then send me a message and I'll give you what I'll advise you on what resources that I have that could help you with that. So the thing with the plot, and I know one of the descriptions that I sort of differ with, and I seem to run into trouble with students being told that the climax is where you introduce the biggest problem. I don't know where students get that idea from, but it's not where you introduce the biggest problem. Climax is really where you solve the biggest problem. And so, climax is really a turning point in the story. What creates that turning point could differ, but for the really short stories that students are writing, the best thing that would create that turning point in the story is when you solve the biggest problem. That's not the end of the story, and if it is you're still having challenges with this, you could look at the video, I think. So this is episode 26 of these lives. So you can look at episode 23 or 24, where I outlined what is called, well, what I'm referring to as the problem solution path, because sometimes we think that, okay, once the problem is solved, that's the end of the story, but it's not. Solving the biggest problem is only what turns things around. It's not the end. And so you still do have to complete to the resolution, which is how are things different now, and what has this turning point created in terms of an impact on the main character and the whole situation. So we really want to go back to this, and these this is what actually guides you. What are you supposed to have? You're supposed to have setting, time, and place, characters skillfully developed through physical description, actions, dialogue. We want all elements of plot, conflict, theme, characters, all the elements of plot as you continue, setting, all the elements of the plot. And then we are reminded that a plot shows the connection between the events. It's not just like stating it. We have to show that connection, which is where skillful use of transitions and paragraphing add clarity to plot structure. That's what they mean by that. We're using transitions to show how everything is connected in this story, right? So that's what we really have to think about. So we're going back to the basics, back to the checklist. And so based on this, what does your student struggle with? What challenges are they facing? Make a list. What marks are they getting now? Then you want to aim for 1 or 2 marks higher than that. So if they're getting 14 now, you're aiming for 16. If they're getting 16 now, you're aiming for 18. If they're getting 18 now, you're trying to get them full marks. And so that's the development. And how do you do that? We go back to what is required. And then we're checking what is required. We're using that as our guide, but we're using, okay, when the student writes an essay, writes a story, what do they have? How different is it from what is required? And that's what you're paying attention to this week. So discuss current status and set a target mark. And then you're going to review the strategies, so the challenges and the strategies to put into place, and that would help you get that target mark. So for my student who has this beautiful writing, but he hasn't been including character descriptions, one of the strategies that he's going to be using is when he writes a story, when the character has an action and the character is doing something, he's going to include a character physical description. So if they're walking, we want to hear about what their shoes are like, or what their legs are like, or their trousers or skirts, or whatever the case is. If they're talking, we might want some facial expression, some eyes and whatnot. If they're opening a door, we can talk about their hand, holding on the handle and describe their fingers. So his assignment there is when the character has an action, see how he can add in a character physical description. Also, when something major happens, the character has to show an emotional response to it, but they need three things. When something major like the conflict comes up, they need emotional response, they need behavior, so they have to do something in response, and they need speech. Speech could be thoughts, speaking out loud, or dialogue. So that is what is needed. So pretty much what I've given him as an assignment to help him include what's missing is to follow the 12 point. And so that is like the core foundation of what's going to help students who are struggling include the details that they need. And then, so once you have some of that clear and you created your strategy, you have your target, you created your strategy, write a narrative and see how that worked out. All right. And so, of course, if you're looking for samples, prompts, idea of the 12-point plot that I just mentioned, it's in this booklet. And then the emotions and responses, which I've seen that lots of students are having challenges with, you can get a copy of this, right? So I have, based on student responses, I realized that I needed to add in some more explanations in this to make it really, really clear, like step by step, because that's my agenda, giving step by step details on how to do these things. And so you get exploration of this, and I'm adding in one more worksheet in each section so that students can know exactly how to create their own with examples. Because this, I'm seeing that this is showing up more and more as a major challenge with student writing. So they have lots of explanations of setting and what's going on around the character, but the character themselves and how the character responds, that's where challenges are propping up and cropping up is what I meant to say. All right. And so let's see. Now we're on to comprehension, and we're looking at responding to questions and graphics. And so for this one, as promised, I'm going to stop share and put up the 2023 and 2024 graphics. right? So this one is the 2023. Let me get up the 2024. So I'll just be interchanging between the two of them, right? This one is the 2024, right? This is the 2024. It was a notice. And the 2023 is this one. It was an advertisement, right? So let's look at the questions. Now we're talking about responding to questions for graphics today. And so we have graphics have 4 questions. You'd notice that each question is worth 2 marks, right? And so let's just do a quick study on the kinds of questions that were asked. So in this one, we want 2 images and the impact of those images. So 2 images in the advertisement that will encourage outdoor activities. So we're asking for an interpretation of the images on the graphic. Then we have 2 reasons why the words garage sale are written in big, bold capital letters. So here we're looking for an assessment of the text, and not just generally, but the visual aspect of the text. So why is it big? Why is it bold? Why is it in capital letters? So this is all about what the text looks like, right? And so far we've been looking at visual things, yeah? Images and their impact, reasons for why texts would look certain ways, and then we want to get reasons a person might want to arrive early. So now we're going to go for an interpretation of the graphic itself, what information we get from the graphic, right? So we're looking at the details here, but not just what are the details. We're interpreting the details. And then we want to add our own spin to things. So we're asking students, you know, what they would do differently. So if they are the creator of the graphic, what would they do to accomplish the purpose of the graphic? That's kind of like what this question is asking. So what are the 2 images? So what is the purpose of the graphic? It's an advertisement. And so what other images in the advertisement can I use that would function to be an ad and get people interested and so on? So it's more interpretation. Even when we're asked which 2 images, we're asked about outdoor activities. So we have to interpret the image. And so those are the kinds of questions. And this is why every question is worth 2 marks. So let's go now. So this is a notice. Let's see what kind of questions do we get here. Um, Use details from the notice to answer the following question. Who is responsible for the notice? So who created it? Who is invited? Who's the audience? And so we're interpreting the information. Then give 2 reasons why the word notice is written in big, bold capital letters. Wait, that sounds familiar. Give 2 reasons why garage sale is written in big, bold capital letters. So yeah, visual elements of text definitely gonna come. We had back to back there. There is a question on visual elements of the text. Make sure your students can understand and answer that question. So what's the reason? Now, why would something be larger in a graphic? Is so that it could command attention. Why would it be in capital letters? So people would notice it and draw their attention. Why is it in bold? Because it's important. That's why we want it to be in big, bold capital letters. So, what are the 2 reasons? One, to get the reader's attention because of the size in comparison to the rest of the graphic, readers will notice that, right? And then the second thing is because it's important. You want to get their attention because of the size, and you put it on that particular word because that particular word is important to the message of the graphic. And so there could be other reasons, but it'll be playing around with those. Make sure you have a clear understanding of how to answer that kind of question. It comes up. Suggest two pieces of information that should be included in the notice. So this means a student needs to understand what a notice is and how to create one. So what are the required details for the graphic? So we're looking at the details here. And I didn't get question 36. So my suggestions would be um, two reasons why somebody might attend the meeting. So we're interpreting the audience. We can also ask one element on the notice that lets people know what the notice is about. So now we're identifying and observing the different elements of the notice and the images. And then I gave another option. Sometimes students could be asked to interpret a particular image and determine whether it makes sense or not for the purpose of the graphic that is given. So that was taken from when I did um, the thing itself. Excuse me. The When I shared the 2024 version, because the version of the 2024 exam that was circulating did not have question 36. So my copy, I made three suggestions, and in the answers that I gave possible answers for each of those three suggestions to complete that question 36. So you want to read and discuss graphics, definitely. You're looking at the newspapers, but you're not just looking at advertisements. Remember, there are different kinds of graphics. So you're looking at ads, you're looking at notices, you're looking at different types of graphics. You may also want to look at a flow chart, you might look at labels, and you're interpreting these graphics. And then you want to study how the questions are asked and answered, and then you're completing a graphic comprehension. And if it is you need some help with that, I have these. If you already have these, thank you for purchasing. I'm working on some others. I'm taking a little while, yes, I know, but you'd get them hopefully by the end of this month. My plan was for end of last month, but then I got distracted with creating some of the other worksheets that students really need. So now I'm back on working on the completing that. But this is already done and available. So if you want to see my recommendations for answering the exam questions, then definitely um, get a copy of these. So that is it. I'm looking at my time. Over by just a little bit in terms of the hour. Thank you so much for those of you who were able to stay with me through the entire thing. Of course, you have the different sections, and I think I went on a little bit more with my rant this morning. But it's good information, and I'm hoping that you're able to use the information to see how you can really help your student or help the students that you work with. So, what did we look at today? So we looked at competition reports, discussed a few details about that, strategies for you to um, review competition reports. We looked at the narrative writing checklists by reviewing what the grading rubric has in it. And you're meant to make a list of the things that you need to focus on, what the child needs to focus on, what strategies you are implementing to help them do what they need to do, and you're setting a target for what mark you want to get um, at this time with the narrative. And then with responding to graphics, we looked in a little more detail about the questions and how you can answer some of those recurring questions, the kinds of information that you would need. So that is the end of the session today. I appreciate your time and I hope that it was helpful. If you have any questions about any of the topics that we discussed, send me a WhatsApp message. My number is on the screen, 717-4993. Send a WhatsApp message. I may not be able to answer when I'm working on the worksheets. I don't like to take calls because it kind of throws me off. When I'm in class, I can't take a call. So, yeah, send me a WhatsApp message and I'll answer as soon as I can. All right. Um, and if you want to get a hold of any of the resources, WhatsApp me as well. I'm here to support as much as I can with the resources and with answering questions. Okay. So, do have a wonderful rest of the day today, Tuesday. And I look forward to seeing you next week when we continue with Journey to SCA 2025. This is Shelly and Edwards Barron signing off of the platform. And we made it through without any glitches. So, yay! Thank you so much again. All right. Take care, guys.